Everybody's well. Welcome to the Board of Education and Business Committee meeting of Tuesday, February 27th. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the lands of the Alpine-speaking people, specifically the Quw'utsun Village. The Board of Education is honored to be able to collaboratively walk beside the Quw'utsun, Malahat, Sagasa, Palel, the Mellicats, the Mayas, and the Axan people who have cared for this land for thousands of years. We walk gently on the ceded and unceded territories of their lands as we work together to lift up all of the Ahasmanim. Adoption of the agenda, please. Trustee Schmidt, Trustee Lise, all in favor. Minutes of the January 30th, 2024 Board of Education and Business Committee meeting. Trustee Thorne, Trustee Schmidt, all in favor. All right, action list. We don't have one. Petitions and delegations, none. George Bonner, welcome.
Hello. My name's Updish and this is Del. We're here to present our festival for George Bonner. Do you prefer if we stand or sitting is okay?
Whatever's comfortable for you.
Thanks. Okay, so we're going to talk about George Bonner, and this is my second year there, and Del has been there her third year. This is your third, and we've been having lots of fun and getting to know the staff, the students, the families. So it's been a really great journey. So we're going to share some of our journey with you. So our school profile, we are set in a rural school community. Our population is 481 students, 22 divisions. We have a very strong collaborative PAC. Our PAC meetings, usually go 2.5 hours with lots of great conversation and treats, which we enjoy. We have a wide range of economic background families and a very diverse population. Our building was designed as a high school, and then it was modified as a middle school, and now an elementary school. So it's gone through a little bit of change, a lot of change. The strengths of this building, one of them is that there's lots of space for different things to happen. For instance, we have a foods program, we have a wood shop, we have lots of spaces for different things that need to happen in order to help support our students in the building. The stretches for a building like this is that we have an upper atrium and a lower atrium where most of our classes are. The upper atrium has all our intermediate students, and the lower atrium has all our primary students. So with primary kindergarten students, it's a big space for those little ones. So sometimes we find that they just need a little bit more gentle reminders of where their space is and to help and encourage them to their classrooms. So that can be a stretch for some of our students. And we also are trying to introduce some sensory paths to help the students that need that regulation as they're going from one end of the building to the other end. So if they're focused walking down these long hallways, hopefully that by the time they get to where they need to, they are still regulated enough to continue their learning journey. One of the things that we work on is sense of belonging. So you'll see that the orange is our WITS program. We do lots around the WITS program and try to have students model, adults in the building model a lot of the WITS program, and what does it look like when you get into conflict? What are some of the pieces you can work on together, help each other through those pieces? We have our green team. That's the little, it's not a touch screen. We have our little boy with the Bonner picker-uppers. So anywhere from kindergarten to grade 7, they come out on their own time and come and say, can we please have the picker-uppers? We want to go and do some green team. And it's like, yes. come along. And of course, we have our Bonner Bear there out on our monthly runs that the school does for different themes, different things that happen throughout the school year. And then we have lots of sports teams to keep the kids busy, keep the spirit going for George Bonner, and always full, very full teams, if not 2 to 3 teams for each sport. So that's always really
and
great.
Rock band, don't forget
Oh
rock
yes,
band.
and rock band.
Every Thursday at lunchtime on our stage, you get to hear kiddos learning how to play guitars and singing and really having a good time. When's our concert?
Right before spring break. Yeah. One of the students has just picked up guitar in September and is now going to be doing a solo in the concert. So it's really good. Then, of course, when we are looking at our FESL and looking how do we improve students and help them move forward, we look at various types of data. We look at report card data, the FSA, the learning inventories, cell information, and of course the student learning survey of how they're feeling about the school is really helpful. And some of the pieces, the ways that we collect this data is through class reviews and school-based team meetings. I feel that it's an important piece to also get the information about our students from the adults that are helping to move them forward in their learning. So some of the pieces that we look at with class reviews is, you know, where are they? How are they developing? Who is this child? And how can we support them? This is Elena. We have started up a happy cart because this is what she needed as part of her learning, to be able to socialize with different adults or students in our building. So from having that information come from the adults, we knew that this would help her move forward and also help her with her learning. And she needed to know who the kids were, who are the adults that she's, you know, bumping into throughout our hallways. And Friday was the first day that she went out on the happy cart, came back so happy. And the adults were very happy because the treats were for them. So it's end of the week, it's a great way to celebrate. So in our class reviews, we look at the academic, the behavior, and the wellness of the students. And of course, we look at the tiers. At class level, what are the pieces that need to be happening? What are the good instruction pieces that are going on? But then we have students who need, targeted intervention, and those might be pieces of small group interventions, flexible scheduling, and then if we're looking at some behavioral students, we may be looking at, well, does this child need a check-in? What does a child's check-in look like? Are there social skill groups that need to happen for a certain group of students? And where are the spaces that this can happen? Or can we arrange some counseling time? So that's your tier 2. In tier 3, we have a few students that may need some intensive interventions, and that's when we look at, are there some district supports and screens that we need to look at? What are some of the supports that we can do to help these children in tier 3? And while we're having these class reviews and conversations, we always look at, in conversation with the teachers and the adults, what are the strengths of your class? Like when we're getting to know them. And what are your concerns as a whole class? And what are your main goals for your whole class? And then what are the individual needs? So having that information helps us to put the programs in place. So this is a copy of what we give to the teachers, and we walk them through it.
It's big. It's a big piece
It's,
of paper.
it's 11 by 17, yeah. So the teachers don't have to sit there and write small. So that is the information we collect, and as we sit through school-based team meetings or IEP meetings, these pieces come out, and we're able to help move the thinking of the teachers, the students, the parents forward in what are the supports, where did they start, where are they now, and where are we taking them to. So it's a great document to help support the understanding and moving the learning forward.
And as a teacher, it's a really nice one as well to be able to sit and really think about your class and go, who is it that I really need these extra supports for? And who is it that, no, these ones will be really good. So it gives that nice focus as well.
Thank you. It's always nice because Dell's in the classroom part-time, so it's nice to, so what do you think? How is this going to help? And then, of course, that leads to our goals, and the 3 goals that we have, and it's to identify and regulate the behaviors, and always keeping in mind kindness. It has to be about kindness. How do we move through our day with kindness? And then also increase academic performance, literacy and numeracy, and then have the Indigenous ways of knowing throughout the school day, embedded right through the day. And of course, in order to do that, we need to know where the students are starting off. So I'm going to give this over to Del to talk about the in-depth data.
So we have all types of different places that we get our data from. And so one of our groups that we were looking at and focusing on is our grade 4s. And this is our data from our last year's grade 4s. And these are students who are either on track, so they're developing, they're proficient, or they're exceeding from our FSAs. And when we looked at it, you can see we had 70% of our grade 4s were doing really well. With our Indigenous, we only had 43%, and that was one piece of data that made us stop and go, okay, what other supports are we needing? What other ways are we going to need to move forward? And our designated looks fantastic. I think we had one designated child in here, and they did really well. So, and that's where our data, you look at the different pieces. What we've done, though, is we've taken that, so our last year's data, this is our dashboard for that same cohort of kids. And looking at it from the fall, we have 43% of them there that aren't where we like them to be in their comprehension. And that is really nice data for us, to be able to go in and go, okay, so it looked like we had 70% from our previous thing, but we've got a good 43% here. So what are we doing? What are some of the things that we can do with this? And we're looking at a number of different interventions coming across the grades and the way that we're teaching to be able to target the kids. And Adesh will talk in a couple of minutes about one of the things that we're doing with our grade 4s and 5s in literacy groups, which is really helping a lot with that. And then we have, of course, this was a fun piece that I didn't know we could do and learned that we could do, is we could take our dashboard and actually take it right down to our different learners. And so this is that same group of grade 5s, and the top one is our diverse learners. And so with this one, we had, I think, 11 different students in here. So last year, a lot of the students didn't write the FSAs for a variety of reasons. We think we had we were around 95% students writing the FSAs this year, which is really good. And then our Indigenous learners, again, right about 37% that are doing well. But again, that still gives us our 62% that it shows us we still have some work that we need to be digging into with that.
Which will be nice then to look at our spring dashboard.
Yeah.
Because we now have our fall dashboard, and then seeing how the interventions throughout the year so far, how has that supported and helped us? And so we're quite excited and hopeful to look forward to our spring dashboard and see the difference.
So the difference that a year makes, because we've got our new FSA data that's come in for this year. So our blue up here is last year's data, and the red, the burgundy, is this year's data. So this is our new grade 4s. And so we have a different cohort that's coming through. And again, this is going to be really nice to have a look as we get into the spring dashboard and looking at the targeted supports that have been going with this group. This is a group we had a number of students who've come through, and then grade 4 is also a year where we get a number of people, if they're coming out of French immersion, that seems to be a year where they come and join us, and also from down the road at the nature school, they come and join us for usually around grade 4 as well. And this year we had quite a few. One of the other places we look a lot at is our data for the feeling of belonging. And we have two different places that we have been looking at data apart from what we collect on the daily, what's going on around the school. And this one comes from our student survey, learning survey from last year. And we have 75 to 85% of kids feeling like it is a safe place for them to be, which is really good. Looking at the data, digging down into the other ones of why they don't feel it's safe, and looking at those places and what we can do, especially our bathrooms. Seems to be one of our places. Can you solve problems in a peaceful way? Our grade 4s can, they say, at 90%. Most of the time they can. And our grade 7s are most of the time. And are you learning to care for your mental health? This was a really interesting piece that when we were looking at this one, because our grade 4s were quite high, 95%, and our grade 7s were about 40%. And then we realized that this piece of data is gathered usually around this time, and we do a really strong push right after spring break with mental health with our grade 7s. And so it's one of those pieces that it's like, okay, we need to start moving more of that back further in the year as well. And the last piece, this one's from our social emotional data that we do for our mental health plans and learning how to calm down. These are all of our grade 3s to grade 7s. We've got 85% of them that know how to relax when they're feeling worried. And this is a big one that we're finding with the anxiety in the schools, is learning how to get them. And this is the one piece that I love, and the 87% means there's 13% of those kids that we still need to work on that don't feel like they have a trusted adult, but 87% have at least one adult in the school that they feel is a trusted adult that they can come to. And having that in school is really important for them. So that's just a bit of the data that we've been using, working on.
And then so one of the, oh, did we miss one? That's on the back one. Good. Okay. So one of the ways, some of the ways that we've been supporting the literacy in our school is through the kindergarten, grade 1 and 2 classes have been working with UFly, which is, it's an explicit phonics program, and that promotes foundational reading skills. And we found that that is working really well right through our primaries. And then we also have our literacy groups in grade 4 and 5. So we've taken all our grade 4 and 5 classes and made groups for them depending on what they needed. And they're also using parts of the UFly program to help build those early literacy reading skills and all the way to fluency. So what is it that the students need was how the groups were developed and are able to work through them. So there was a fall session, and then we've reassessed, and now we've begun with the next session that will go to the end of the year. Collaboration blocks have also been blocked in and scheduled right from the beginning of the school year, and that's for staff to be able to collaborate and talk about student learning and to be able to figure out what are their next steps in order to support the students. So our PLC times is used for collaborating with each other and figuring out what is it that we need to work on together as a school community, and where are we headed with our kids? What are the pieces? So we've looked at anxiety, how is that impeding on the learning? What are some of the areas we have in our schools for space to help when students are feeling overwhelmed, and how are those spaces working? We're also working on building common language and strategies through working with different resources like Excel and the self-regulation programs. And we've also had Hannah Beach out at our school over the last year just to help work through the anxiety pieces and how do we as adults figure those pieces out with the students. So that's been really helpful as a school learning piece. And then also we have different things that the learning pieces come through for the Indigenous learning. We have Cowichan, Malahat, Métis. Right now they're going through some knitting, learning to knit with some of our Cowichan knitters. And, yeah, and Dell is learning to knit, which is great. And we also have the Métis, is that the students painted Métis. Were you there when they did that, the Métis pole?
The Métis pole, we had somebody come in to do, LaRose, Chris LaRose, But they've been painting some of the other poles, the Indigenous poles that are down in the atrium.
Yeah, and there you can see 2 students that were painting the one of the poles, and they're just filling in the red spaces for it. Otherwise, it was pretty much put together last year, and this year they're just finishing them off. And then, of course, we have different times of the year when we have somebody that comes in to show and share the culture of cooking the different foods, which the kids always love to take part in. And the other piece is that's the Malahat Youth poster that you see up there, and that's part of the learning, their learning journey that the Indigenous students are having to do. And that was just something they did at the Malahat for the Malahat Nation students. And they were very proud to share that with us. And then, of course, we're also involved with a lot of community members and making connections there. We have Brentwood peers that come out to help with kindergarten students. They always have a buddy program that they do, and they're just making plans for that this spring. And that's based on literacy. And then we have our Kelsey peer leaders who come out and just help with problem solving or just having someone to talk to, and that happens in the fall. And then we have grandparents, that 1 or 2 that usually come in here and there just to help and read with students that, you know, need a little bit of extra somebody to read to if they're having difficulties. It's always nice to have another person. Roots of Empathy, that's Miss Newberg in the checkered shirt there, and that's her baby Grady. And so she's part of the Roots of Empathy program, and they're with a kindergarten, a K1 class this year. And of course, Movember, the mustaches, and Jump Rope for Heart, Tour de Rock, those are all pieces that a lot of the schools also take part in. So lots of community connections. Diversity, we talk a lot about diversity, and we, you know, look at our multicultural calendar. We look at the students that are in our building and try to make sure that we incorporate their cultural pieces. It was really nice. We were talking about what is it? Hanukkah, and it was just before Christmas break, and so I mentioned in our assembly, I go talking about Hanukkah, and afterwards I had 2 of the students from the school come up to me and said, nobody's ever talked about Hanukkah. That was so nice. Thank you for bringing that up. And now I was able to share. They wanted to go back to their classroom and be able to share more about it. And so it was like opening a door for that student, and it just filled my bucket, which was wonderful. And that's one of the things we do, fill a bucket, kindness bucket. So I said, you just filled my bucket. And she said the same to me, so it was really good. So we just try to look at who's in our building and just make sure that everybody's culture is somehow recognized, celebrated, and they're able to share, open those doors for those kids. And of course, we do our welcome board, and that's many, many different ways of saying hello. We have namaste, we have bonjour, konnichiwa, just different ways. And then every so often we'll have a new family that comes in, and when they find out what the board is about, if they have a different way of saying hello, they'll come tell me, and we add it to the board. So it's just a nice way, and I welcome you to come celebrate our story with us if you ever have a chance to come out. We tried really hard to bring a student with us, but just where we are in the South End, it was very hard to bring somebody out, or they were involved in too many activities. So we had a video recording of a student who was very enthusiastic and wanted to share her experience about a safe space in our school. So I'm just going to play this.
Hi, Vivian. I see that you're in the bear den.
Yes.
Can you tell us something about the bear den?
Yes, I can. So, one thing about the bear den is it's a nice, calm, quiet place where you can come if it is too, overwhelming outside, and it's a nice place where you can hang out with your friends and do some activities.
Do you come here quite often, Vivian?
Yes, I do.
And what kinds of activities help you feel calm?
Well, there's a thing called felting. I like to do that, where sometimes I just like to hang out with my friends and draw.
And does this happen during the lunch recess time?
Yes, it does.
Have you noticed a lot of people come use the den?
Yes, but not as many as 500 kids.
Awesome. Is felting what's happening behind me right now? Okay, let's take a look. Hunter, what is it that you're doing?
It's called felting.
And what do you do with felting?
So there's one needle, you stab it over and over again, and there's little notches on the needle that grab the felt and push it down and pull it up.
That's awesome. And you enjoy doing that?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Thanks, Vivian. Thank you.
We wanted to make sure that dance was in there. So that is, the Bear Den is one of our areas that we have where if children become overwhelmed and they just can't be outside at lunch recess time, that is an option for them to go to. And we usually have anywhere from 6 to 12 students in there during lunch recess time. And that space is also used throughout the day. Sometimes EAs will take students in there. We always make sure there's an adult in that space because it is a room within the building. And so, yeah, so students and adults come and go throughout the day. So it's just a great space to have. And that's what we're about at Bonner. Thank you.
Trustees, any questions? Mr. Thorne?
When you do the FSA, do the Aboriginal children take it, or?
Yes, they do.
Because I can't stress enough the importance of Indigenous people taking the FSA, because only then can you see who is in the category of the different categories that you have.
Yes.
So thank you.
Trustee Croft?
Thank you. Well, thanks. School makes me want to go back to school. You know, all those wonderful days when your kid was in elementary and it's so warm and fuzzy. I was impressed with what you were saying about sort of the safety and, you know, do I know what adults am I comfortable with math scores? And they're really very high, and you pointed out that, so now what we learned from this is there are those smaller groups that now need some attention. So I kind of make an assumption that when you have, you know, 87% who are happy and 13 who aren't feeling so safe, that may be a slightly different audience than your first 87%. And so my question to you is, have you had time to think of or ponder perhaps reaching that particular group, recognizing that they may have a little bit different than that first 85?
So go first.
Yeah, there are lots of, you know, different things, and if I go down in those numbers, I think probably 5% of those would be some of our grade 7s who are just, I'm done, I'm ready to move on.
Yeah.
And so it's like finding what kind of activities can we have them and the connections can we make for them, and then looking at all the specific, because you can, knowing our school, knowing the kids, you can sort of see who some of those ones are. And I think that's one of the things I love about Bonner is we have such a diverse staff. And when we say staff, it's like our EAs are phenomenal. Our secretaries are phenomenal. Everybody really connects in with the kids when they, with whatever's going on. Our lunchtime supervisors. And so it's finding those kids who aren't, and it's like, how can we make that connection with them?
Yeah.
So you're almost looking at sort of a one-by-one kind of a personal connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the noon hours always come out to us as well, and they'll say, oh, I noticed this student walking by themselves. What's their story? And do I need to connect? So when we hear stuff like that from our noon hours, it's just like, yes, and we will fill you in. So, you know, and then also the Bear Den is also a space that's new this year. So we know that some of this space will help them, and hopefully they'll feel differently.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Trustee Schmidt?
So I want to go back to your mental health piece, because you talked about this push that you do after spring break, but because we're always supporting wellness throughout the year at all grades, why do you think that there's such a dip in that grade 7 that they need that push at the end of grade 7?
I think it's just that's when we have our speakers. We have a group of speakers who come in and do some a series of 10 lessons with the kids. And we find that for them, the maturity level, having them is the best sort of time for them to come in. But that being said, we still do activities all the way through, but we might not be as explicit with them that when we're doing these types of things, we are actually working on mental health, and we're talking about, anxiety, or we're talking about how to get ready for a test, or what to do when you're stressed out. They might not think of that as their mental health.
But hopefully, having those ongoing conversations and building the common language around mental wellness, that those coming sevens will see a change, because the common language will have built over the years. So it'll be exciting to see what happens in a few years with that piece.
Thank you, ladies, and great presentation.
Thank you.
Susan.
Thank you. Yeah, great presentation. I'm curious, and this was like, I think during the safety slide and whatnot, you mentioned washrooms. Can you elaborate on what's happening?
They go in, there's some of our toilets, one of our toilets upstairs and one of our toilets downstairs will overflow. And it's just little things like that. Or as you walk in, we have the lights that are off, and so you go around the corner. And so as you get to the corner, they come back on. But, it's one of those ones when our kindergartens come in, we always, and the new kids, we always go through and give them lots of as we look right now, there's no lights on down there. Okay, let's see how far we have to go in before they're going to turn on. and there's a certain point, and then they pop in. And so there's little things like that sort of stress them out. And when we actually dig down in them, it's things like that is actually causing their anxiety in the bathrooms.
And also the loudness. I go regularly into the girls' washrooms, because they come out and say, oh, it's too scary in there. And I'm like, really? Okay, show me what's scary. None of the toilets have been flushed because they're too loud, it's too scary. So I just go in there and flush all the toilets every so often. It's one of the things we do.
That's necessary.
Toilet dampeners.
Great, thank you.
How are the teachers doing with your mental health pieces? And how are they feeling about it?
Specifically about the student pieces, or them themselves?
Them themselves.
Well, as I said, it is definitely a learning journey for us, because we're also just beginning to learn the staff and getting to know one another. So as we're learning and supporting one another, I think we're starting to open up with one another and just to help support. So this year has been a lot more conversations around how we're feeling, how can we be supportive, how can I help you, and they're also reaching out to us more, that we're finding, and having those more open conversations. Because it's hard coming into a building that's so big with a lot of staff and trying to get to know everybody. It takes time, and I think we're getting there now. So it's having better and more enriching conversations, and more down to earth and honest conversations.
That's good. How's your relationship with the Malhat? How are you finding that?
We meet every month on a regular basis, and we keep open communications with the Malahat. Even the, what's his name? The chief of Malahat, I believe his name is Charlie, I want to say, I'm not sure. But every so often we do get a call from the chief of the Malahat, and he
If
just...
there's something going on, he'll just call.
Yeah, he'll call. He goes, just want to know, this is what I've heard. And it's like, great, thank you for calling. And have a conversation, and he's good, and he goes, I will do what I can to help support. So it's really good having those conversations, and I'm glad he feels that he can just pick up the phone and give us a call. So I think we're on a good pathway with them as well.
I think the other thing that's been really fantastic is working with them, with the students, and looking for student success. So our kindergarten teachers go down to the preschool, and they get to meet all of the kiddos that are going to be coming up and see them in the preschool. We have an EA who is hired by them that specifically working with our upper intermediate students to help them with transition into Kelsey.
And in our springtime, we have our grade 3s and 6s that go and visit the Malahat and spend some time within their language and culture and just getting to know, the beach life, getting to know the language of how they use the sea and the beach to work off of and incorporate into their lives. And so it's there. We're working, and it's really nice to have that relationship with them.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I have talked with our Heatwas in Malahat, and they are pleased with the relationship as are some of the other bands because it is mixed. So I have to say you're doing something right, and I'm really happy with that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Next time, bring the bear and.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a stock.
It's a stock, but it looks like it's skinny, but it's not.
Remember at Climate Action, they said we only see the city, and I go, no, there's this beautiful.
Oh, that's the one, okay. Really good?
This is saying that it has stock, it comes up for 2 weeks.
Okay, enhancing learning, Russell, Mr. Rowan.
Yeah, thanks for having me again with the festival data. This is something that's being done annually for the last 3 years, certainly. This is my second. The key points of data we wanted to make sure that we share with the board, and this goes to the school as well, is the FSA data, so grade 4s and 7s, the student learning survey data that all the kids complete in grades 7, 10, 12, our grad rates, specifically, again, the kids with diverse abilities, that's any kid who's identified or has an IEP, our Indigenous students, and it breaks it down to on reserve and off reserve, as well as our children in care. And lastly, our post-secondary transitions, those that are going on to the post-secondary college or university or trades within the 1 to 3 years. So the first one's the FSA data, and you can see the on track or extending. On track in the FSA, it combines developing and proficient into an on track. So there's emerging, on track, and then extending. And you can see our numbers there with the grade 4 literacy, 58% are on track or extending. Our numeracy, 45%. But I do want to draw attention to the participation rates. And I know, Joe, you asked that before. There was a time 5 years ago when those participation rates were around 30%. The provincial participation rate is 70%. So we are getting feedback from all of our kids, more or less, 87%, right, 90%. Provincially, you're only seeing that at about 70%. My hunch is those that are not writing might change the results provincially, whereas we're getting a real picture of everybody. We've done a lot of work with literacy in the last number of years with our frameworks. Our feeling is that we're seeing, and we're getting great feedback from our schools, especially the elementaries on this one, is that it's raising the level of students. We're not seeing it in the data there because it's a broad scale, right, a 4-point scale. So to move kids into that range, we're moving them up the emerging scale, and we should see results getting them more kids in that on-track rating. Grade 7 numbers, similar, 53% last year for extending or on track in literacy, 40% in numeracy. Provincially, the on track in grade 7 was about 69% in the literacy. So there is some work for us to be done there. But as mentioned, we see that as a growth area. That 40% numeracy, provincially, it's 45 to 50%. The numeracy is a thing across the province. And again, I do want to draw attention to that participation rates. 69% is the provincial average, or provincial participation rate, whereas we're even that. This is the big slide about all the grad rates that we're measuring, all students 5-year. So just to remind, the 5-year is a straight shot. When you enter grade 8, you go grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you're graduating within 5 years. Some students need an extra year, and so that's where what's called the 6th-year grad rate is perhaps they need an extra year. It's worth noting, and it's perfectly acceptable to take a 6th year. It gets you the same graduation as you would with 5. It just means you might have needed a little bit more time. All students, the 6-year grad rate, 85%, we're right close to the provincial average, which is just under 90. The 6th year Indigenous grad rate, the 58%, provincially, that is a 74%. So we're down there, we're behind where we need to be there. Highlighted a couple of ones for us here. The on-reserve rate of graduation, so the 6th year on-reserve Indigenous rates of 33%. We can clearly see where our area of growth lies. It's the on-reserve rate. When you look at Indigenous off-reserve at 79%, that's really close to the all students, and that's a good solid graduation rate for off-reserve. Breaking it down a bit more for you, so there's a grad rate. There's 2 types of different graduations. We are not talking about Evergreen, which is for students who've had diverse needs and they meet their program, so it's a graduation, but it does not get you into college, university, trade schools, etc. So if we're talking about graduation, there's an 80 credit regular Dogwood, which is 20 courses over grade 10, 11, 12, and then there's an adult grad. The adult grad is after your 18th birthday, English 12, Math 11, and 3 other grade 12 courses. I know adult Dogwood will get you into a program post-secondary. It's a great tool for those who need it. I know Finesse provincially is questioning whether the adult Dogwood is being overused at times for our Indigenous kids. So the 5-year grad rate of our Indigenous students, 46%, has to get better. When you take out the adult grad, the adult Dogwood, so just pure 80 credit Dogwood, it is actually 44%. There's only 2% of those are an adult grad. On the 6th year side, we're at 58%. Now, 9% of those were adult Dogwoods. So 49%, when you talk about how many kids are graduating with the 80 credit Dogwood, it's 49%. Definitely, we need to do better. But if we're looking at the trend and we think we've gone down, notice that in 2021-22, we may have had a 65% grad rate, but 21% of those were an adult Dogwood. That's too high. And then maybe COVID is playing into that. There's a number of factors playing into that. But we're getting a 58% is an honest measure of where we're at right now, because a 9% adult Dogwood would be more appropriate. This one here is as we mentioned at the start, the students with diverse abilities. The 5-year grad rate last year, it's been holding around that 55%, and the 6th year, 70%. So you get quite a jump up there. I think this would be expected if you have some challenges, that having a little extra time would again be appropriate to your grad rates. The children in care, and this is something we've done a lot of work this year. That children in care, 17% actually graduated within 5 years and only 29% in 6 years. We've done a lot of work this year working with Ministry of Children, the ministry to identify who our kids are that are in care with the ministry, with Lalabatal Spanam, who is the Cowichan Tribes Agency for the Kids in Care, and Kwame Lalem, which is for Indigenous kids from Parksville to the Malahat that are not with Lalabatal Spanam or not with the ministry. And I know it sounds simple, but it took a lot of work for us we meet monthly with each of those agencies. We identify who is in care, who are their social workers, who's out of care, And we've put in filters in our My Ed system so that the schools can all know who is in care at any one time. We've never had a great handle on that forever, of who's in care and how do we identify them so that we can give them more attention and more support. So we hope that's going to work well. Following that up, we've also got our framework for literacy and numeracy. We've also got a health and identity framework that has some very practical tips on how we can support kids in care to really improve those numbers and give them more support. This is all sorts of numbers on this. Our main message here is that, and I think this mirrors what you were asking with Bonner, we don't have last year's, but it did get the year before. It's always a year lag. Our culture of care results, very strong. This is very, very strong. You know, do you feel welcome at your school? Do you feel safe at school? Adults care about me. Is school a school place where you feel like you belong? Our numbers are higher than provincial rankings on this. Our culture of care is very strong. The post-secondary transition, the projected there is because that is not in yet for the three-year part. We are holding strong with our transition to post-secondaries, and this is an area of where we are at provincial averages are stronger. So we wanted to make sure we put on what we're doing about things, and one of our main parts for Indigenous education, because I spent quite a bit of time talking to you about those numbers, we have this staff, we've put a lot of our energy and money into hiring staff who are Indigenous and making sure that we have supports across all of our schools. We have a district elder. Everyone knows Dolly Sylvester. She provides guidance and is I think it really has some great insight for all of us and a great reference point. The HCLAs is the Hulkaminam language, culture and language, and those are it's giving language, lessons, culture, and the history across the district for our schools. In the central zone, so Cohiman, Alexander, Quamachin, Cowichan, we have SOTNs. SOTNs are similar to Indigenous support workers, except SOTNs have a child and youth care degree, so there's a higher level of training, and what they do is they follow along with the grades. So there's a SOTN in grade 7. Next year, we'll go with the kids into grade 8, the grade 8 into grade 9, etc. And the grade 12 person loops back into grade 7. Last year was the first year we had, it was Cara Michelle has looped back into grade 7. So we've done a full cycle there. Building relationships with all the kids and their families over the years. And we feel that's been a really strong program. The Indigenous support workers are supporting students and families in all of our schools outside of the central zone. In the central zone, we have full-time teaching and INED teacher time at Quamachin, Cowichan, Cohiman, and Alexander. Half-time at Francis Kelsey and Bonner. Chemainus and Lake Cowichan both have a half-time INED teacher. And our district coordinator is Hannah Morales, working with all the schools in secondary, and Kara Joyce in the elementary. Some interventions, and this is what we're trying to do for our Indigenous students. Here's our supports. The red, yellow, green is done in November, and it will be done again in April. And it's giving us information on the academic attendance and health. We share that with our nations, we share that with our schools, and it's to inform about where, you know, are we confirming what we think you're doing, and where do we need to put our supports. The literacy dashboard, our feeling is that we have a strong culture of care and we need to focus on literacy and some making sure the kids have those foundational skills. The district coordinators, we're not only as our own Indigenous coordinator, but we have literacy coordinators that working with classroom teachers to make sure we're making a difference in the classroom, not necessarily a pullout for Indigenous students, but we're working with our kids where they need to be worked with in the classrooms. Communication, the monthly Zoom meetings, Updish and Dell had mentioned that they do that with Malahat. Those are done with all 7 of our nations and with the Métis Nation. and communication is very strong. We can phone anybody at any time. It's a very, I think it's become a very well-developed part of our how we operate. I mentioned the monthly meetings with the 3 agencies, the Ministry, L'Alum Tasmanian, and Kwame Lalum. Indigenous Education Council, we met as a group in November. In March, Jason and Robin are talking to more of the nations individually through the budget process and getting feedback there about how we're using our funds and how we're using our supports. We also do all nations for the education reps 3 times on those Zooms, where we see all people all together. Again, mentioned language and culture, very, very important. The HCLAs, we've also reopened up the cultural teaching assistant role because having fluent speakers, the HCLAs, as people are getting a little bit older, it's hard to find the fluent speakers to be that full Hulkman language teacher. So the CTA, maybe not quite as fluent, but we can get the Hulkman in the schools. District-wide, we promote everything we can for field trips, opportunity speakers, cultural presenters, and of course the schools hosting all those activities. Our next steps, making sure we're going to further analyze the data. We're trying to find out where's the leverage points that we can make a difference. We'll have the district framework for FESL, framework for enhanced student learning. So we'll have the FESL report from the district, plus all of our schools will have their FESL, which will include goals. I would argue that almost all of our schools will have a goal around Indigenous education as part of it, and literacy. And of course, reviewing our structures at all times. That's that.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. I see that off reserve does a better job in grad than on reserve, and I can understand why. You mentioned where can we best could start working with these folks. Grade 5. When I was in my little bit younger, watching my kids, when they went to grade 5, they changed. That's when they started drifting away. And the same with the kids in foster care. When I talk to them, they say, our social workers don't get us tutors. They put us in a room and expect you to do your homework. If you don't understand, it doesn't get done, or if it gets done, it's not done properly. So there's some simple little things, and I know working with the College of Legislation, I shouldn't say L'Alum Tasmanian, they have a new name. If you haven't heard it, it'll be publicized very soon. I have yet to learn it.
I haven't heard it from me yet.
It's a good one. Kwame Lalum is really focusing on education, so I'm really impressed with them more than I am with L'Alum Tasmanian. But I think your focus should be on what's happening from grade 5 to grade 6, because that's where the transition dissipates with most First Nation kids. They don't know how to say, I need help, I forgot. They start going through intimidation, mostly created by themselves. And that's when you get the term, the whites go that way, the minorities go that way. And I've noticed it's been a running trend. I sat at this chair for a number of years, and I've seen that. And when I go visit, and I talk to the grade 5s, that's when I notice their attitude changes, their views change. So that's the focus, is to fix the grade 5. Grade 4, they're doing great. When they get to grade 5 and grade 6, it's a whole different story. That maybe you won't, I get frustrated when I see we're gonna give them an adult. I don't like that. Everybody here at the table knows I don't like it. To me, it's just never read all over again. And I want to see genuine dogwoods. I told my daughter, if you get held back, good, because you're going to learn. And by your age, you're going to work harder because you don't want to be in that boat too long. The phonics on reserves are much different after hours. We have our own way of talking inside our homes, our own slang and from parenthood on down. And that has to, you know, find a way to talk to them. So I'm hoping that the new council, who are elected for Council Tribes, will focus on, hey, these are your kids, you're in education. If you don't know what to do with them, find somebody who can tutor them so that they can learn. Because a lot of us went without a lot of that stuff. For me, I had to get aggressive to go find the help, but I still don't have a lot of knowledge. I know a little bit, but I know what my people need, and I know what the weakness is, but no one else has focused on that. They look at statistics. Well, to hell with statistics. Let's look at the child and what grade you say. Then something happens when I get to grade 10, 9, 10, 11. Go back to grade 5, and you start to realize that's where it starts.
Thank you. I just wanted to commend you and thank you for giving this matter form, because the board has been, well, everyone has been looking at this in all the many different ways and complexities, and it just feels to me that in the last 2 years it has been given form where you can give structure and you can offer services that make sense and the data is making sense. So kudos and thanks to you and the team for having done that. I can't even imagine the brain and heart, the mind and heart it takes to accomplish that. Just reflecting on Joe's mention regarding on reserve versus off reserve, and sorry, I have brought it up before, but to me it sort of seems like kind of a location thing. In other words, we have a lot of amazing things going on in the schools that are of course offered to everybody. Is there any thoughts on if location is the way to look at it, or to support the kids on reserve?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, I think on one thing that, and Joe, I appreciate your comments too. The one thing that we're organizing, and we're going to use Couch and Tribes as the pilot for this one, but we're going to the St. Leland gym with the kindergarten, get the parents in to get kids signed up and tell them what school's all about and everything. So going to the nation, we're going to emulate that, or not emulate, mirror that, I guess. In April 16th, we're going to go to, again, St. Leland Gym, provide food as well, but our target audience there is the older kids. Now, not grade 5, I thought that, but grade 8 through 12, have the parents come in and have almost stations, have a welcome with Dolly, and then have stations over here. Hannah can talk about the grad program. Kara can talk about all the student leadership, the Indigenous student leadership that we have, opportunities we have. Ryan Goff's going to come and talk about all the career programs that we have available. And our HR team is going to come and say, we're hiring, right? We want people, if you have a graduation, high school graduation, we want to hire you as well. To the parents and to give the kids, please come to school, and there's purpose and reason coming to school. So we're trying to go to the nation as well.
Just a quick follow-up. I know sometimes the board and government-to-government kind of conversations are helpful, so I hope that you and Robin will keep us apprised if there's anything we can do along those lines.
Trustee Schmidt.
You know, when I was at the Indigenous Student Leadership Group for budget, and listening to them talk about a variety of different things, and seeing themselves in the schools and how important that was. So I thank you for trying to figure out a way, but I also wonder if they can almost be the peer tutors, like, you know what I mean? Because that room of students was powerful, as some we see at DSAC, so it was really nice to see their faces in both places. But I thought that group of kids were really powerful, and I often wonder if we underutilize those pumpkins, because Cheryl's word. Whoops. Those kiddos.
Kudos to Cheryl, certainly.
Yeah, kudos to Cheryl. And I also want to say thank you. I've been at this table for an awfully long time, and kids in care have always been my passion. And I haven't always believed that there was enough being put in there, but I believe that now. When I see that you realize the school is not a priority for those kids, because some of them are in survival mode, some of them have gone through trauma, yada yada. They jump around so fast that it's so hard to keep track of them. But I just want to say thank you for putting, I believe now, the effort to catch them and to support them. So I just wanted to make that point of saying this is the first real piece where I'm convinced over a very long period of time that we might catch them now.
Thanks.
So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, with the Indigenous student, I think a few of us noticed that as well, and Darcy's going to talk about Couch and High, but there's a Indigenous, it's still to be named, Indigenous Cultural Language Center. That's a thought of ours.
Those kids.
Using those kids as peer tutors with younger kids to promote the culture.
Because they're brilliant.
Yeah.
They were brilliant. Yeah.
So it is on our minds. It's something we're thinking about.
I have a question. So are Indigenous kids in care and our non-Indigenous kids in care, what do those numbers look like? Are they fairly similar or different?
In care, our Indigenous kids are about 80% of the kids in care.
Okay.
So the numbers, when you're right, Randy, when you go to the Indigenous, some of those Indigenous grad rates on reserve, I shouldn't say on reserve, I'm not positive of that, but a lot of 80% of our kids are in care, yes, are Indigenous.
Okay. And how do their outcomes mirror each other, or?
It's a good question. Yes, yes, for the most part. In many ways, yes. I think when you're looking at grad rates of 17% and all that, yes, the kids are facing challenges. I would argue that some of the on reserve in care kids are facing, our numbers are weaker there.
And how, when you're talking to the ministry, I know it's really hard, but are they doing anything to help us get those kids up?
Thank you. I know that the ministry is working very closely with Ministry of Children and Families, because the challenge would be is around the identification. Because I think that students who are defined as children in care could be in care for a week, a month, or even long term. And so there's this challenge around confidentiality that creates a bit of a challenge between how we know those children, because we know we need to support them, and it's a mandate of the Ministry of Education and Child Care, but there's also the other part of confidentiality that comes into play. So two ministries are trying to figure it out in a better way that we can support the learner.
Because when Joe talks about, we're losing them in grade 5, and if you're in care, it doesn't matter whether you're Indigenous or not, does that mean we're losing them all across the board? And is that something, I know nobody's really studied it, but is that something, how do we fix that? Like, what can we do about it?
Could I pass it over, because I know the team's working on that right now, and I think they're deeply engaged in that. Jeff, can you respond to that?
Yeah, so it's across, so Rand, just to clarify, so what are we doing about it across the board? So I know at the higher levels, working with the ministry and all the funding models, and there's different solutions there. At the granular level, what we're doing is so what we did is we created a framework, identity, health, and belonging, and in the framework, we're trying to in there put in all the resources so that there's a starting place for our teachers and schools, and we've got some really good resources on children in care now. I know it's page 46 to 48, or no, 44 to 48, but just because I keep looking at it. But it's really, it's what we can do right off the bat when they're young. One of the big ones is mentorship. Yeah. Is there a teacher or an EA or somebody in the school that is gonna connect with those kids in care purposefully and check in on them and encourage them and let them know that somebody's looking out for them. That's one, that's a very important one. And then what we're doing in class to recognize if there are gaps, are we using trauma-informed practice? Because most of the time those kids will have experienced some trauma in their life. So how are we approaching them? Are we sensitive to that and doing that correctly? And there's a number of other strategies, but it's something that they're not, some of those aren't actually costing us extra dollars. They're just about us being aware and doing those things.
Like when Joe talks about grade 5 and I'm a little bit lost and I can't get a tutor, don't know where to go. I'm just gonna take it that that's across the board. What do we do about that? What can we do about it? Because it's, we're losing kids and it's not fair to them because of their things that they're going through. It's just not fair to them. So how do we change that? And is that our responsibility, the ministry's responsibility of Ministry of Children and Families, or both?
I would say both. And what we are doing, and it started in December, so now we've had a couple runs. We'll get the February one soon, but the monthly Zoom with each agency has been really helpful already. Because the question, if we know we need tutoring, we can ask them, how do you get the tutoring? I'll give you another example. If you've been in care, there's lots of funding for post-secondary. Trying to navigate that is complicated. So we've got the links and we put all that into our framework as well, so that as staff, we can help kids go through that. How do you go through the process? How do you, once you've graduated, there's a lot of money there for going on to a college or university. How do you access it? Well, let's figure it out and try this together and do it. We haven't really had much. We've done a little bit of that in the past, but we're doing a lot more.
How do you access that for grade 5?
Well, that's going to be through our hopefully through the agencies where we can ask them what service are you providing. If it's available, we'll certainly bring that on board. And if it's not, hopefully our mentors and teachers, being aware of the students, will use our internal classroom teaching to also give them more attention.
Mr. Thora, Trustee Schmidt, and then Trustee Lisa.
I think I would advise our Indigenous Department to get a copy of the new Child Legislation Act that Couch and Tribes has done. I know I spent 2 years working on it. Education is a big portion. And as far as Clonmacnoise goes, my daughter Sarah is doing their legislation. And she's actually going to be on speaking to the province in the next couple, 3 weeks. And I highlighted things that kind of upset social workers. The children in care on reserve are treated like robots. You go here, you go there. You don't get an opportunity to do for yourself. And that's clearly obvious, and I don't deny that. I made that very clear that it's noticed. I'd go to the school and I could tell which kids were in care just by looking at them. And they don't get the opportunity to have a tutor. Their lives are just so dictated. They don't know how to do home economics. They don't know how to deal with money management because it's done for them. And there's a difference. In Indian world, we have 2 kinds of Indians. The traditional and the educated, that kids can tell who grew up like they are. They can relate. If you grew lucky enough to have a good life, they don't really want to have a lot to do with you because it's not common. And if I'm confusing people, I'm sorry, but I'm telling you the way I see it because I live it. I have kids from Honolulu that come to my house. I go off reserve to visit people in their homes, to talk to their foster kids, do homework. I do my best to do homework, but we've come a long way since see Dick jump in math. But we do our best. And that's something I do because I want to. It's not something I have to, but I want to. Yeah, and so I think a good copy would be well worth reading.
I think that's coming with our relation, with the better communication with them. The other one is, I think a lot of the nations do have tutoring. So for example, the Malahat Nation, I know Mondays and Wednesdays. Mondays is the older kids, Wednesdays is younger kids. They have after school opportunities. Cowichan Tribes Education Department, talking with them more lately. Penelakut has some good opportunities on island. So there's also within, not just foster kids, not just kids in care, but there's some opportunity there as well. But good questions. Appreciate it.
Superintendent.
I feel like I'm out of turn, so I'm happy to wait.
That's okay.
I just want to thank Jeff for being in front of the room and talking about student evidence and data. I think that it is the responsibility of all in education with regard to how do we lift up and support our learners. And I think that over the last couple of years where we've actually dug into the data, had our students participate in terms of how well they're doing overall around achievement, we're triangulating that data, we're working with our nations, we're working with some of our other support areas. And I think that there is a level of responsibility, not only from the educational organization and community, but also other support agencies. And so I think that since COVID, some of those agencies, we've lost our connections with them. Some of them may not even still be in existence. But overall, it is a collective responsibility that I think that we're leaning into, where it is something we have to pay attention to. And so we're doing that and continue to provide those interventions along the way. And I think that, when we bring out this data, there is an emotional response that comes with it, because I think that we're all there to support our learners and how do we do the best we can, but we're always continuing to drive it. And what do we do around those interventions that will actually make sense? So not just Jeff's responsibility here. So,
I don't want to take credit either.
It's a huge team that certainly works toward that, and that's not just the team here, but it's the teams at the school sites and the work that they do everywhere, from the leadership to the teachers to the support staff and so on and so forth. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Trustee Schmidt.
Pre-2011, when I was on the board, when I used to sit on the Humboldt-Mestimo Education Council, we had brought this concern then, and I know that there are other bands that do still have the program within, but Cowichan Tribes Education had actually started a full-blown tutoring program after school, because we did say, after the kids have left our care, then Cowichan Tribes Education needs to pick up where we've left off, to keep those kids supported in their school education. And I know that when we were on our LEA meeting, Another Nation does still have that tutoring program that happens after school. The kids have a safe place to go and do their homework. And I'm wondering if now that we know that we have our Indigenous Council, maybe, but I know that they do tend to bounce us back to education, can that conversation happen again within your group about possible programming started? Because, once the kids leave our schools, we can't necessarily after hours go in and start tutoring kids. And we do have these amazing youth leaders. However, I know that we had said to tribes, you need to help your kids. And so they built it was actually quite an amazing tutoring program that happened for a number of years. And then when the board shifted in 2012, I lost track of what happened with that. And then of course the councils from that point. But I'm almost wondering if that can be revived, because it really gave kids more of a safe place to go than an educational place to go. But it still gave kids a safe place. And so I'm just wondering at your educator's level, if that's something that can maybe rejuvenated through all the nations. I know it does exist because we heard about it, but just maybe a safe place.
The other one we have thrown around a little bit is trying to support the summertime, because if there is a learning gap in the summertime, that will become accentuated. So every year the learning gap can increase. If there's a chance to do some summertime programming, and then thinking about that one as well, like is there an opportunity to do some of that? Because there's after school tutoring, the kids might be in school all day, but that summertime one might have a real impact as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Lise.
Great conversation, lots to think about. And still, the one thing that nobody is talking about is poverty, right? And so we're here talking about all of these learning outcomes and homework and what we can do, and yet we are not addressing social determinants of health and poverty that these families are living in. And yesterday, First Call Child Poverty Report was out, and our numbers are increasing, right? And so we are doing everything in our power to change the outcomes for our children during the day, but the reality is that there are challenges that, as a society, we need to think about. And when we're wondering why we're not making progress sometimes, when you have the giant, such as poverty, that is the overarching world that these children live in, it's very, very challenging. And so kudos to everything that's happening, but I also think we need to have a different lens as a society and a community for the places where our children are living. And I tried to pull it up quickly here on a phone that I can't see very well, but we've had an increase. We're doing better than the Tofino-Ucluelet area, and I believe we are 17.3% of children in this area. So just wanted to put that on the table as the big Debbie Downer, but it's
And that would match our nurse couch and how many we're feeding 1,700 kids a day.
Yeah.
Breakfast and lunch.
Dinner tomorrow, I'm hoping to feed.
Okay, any other questions, Trustee Croft?
Just want to comment on the poverty side, and I think one of the reasons it sort of didn't come up is that we don't gather economic information on our kids, so we can't really roll that into the data. So I thank you for the reminder. I just wanted to state that we can only represent the data we can gather, but yeah, duh. And you know, a quick dive into the recent, not recent, but the most recent Stats Canada stuff will clearly show you that our middle class has been really hollowed out. We have a high average income, but we have a crap median income. So that tells you that all the income's traveling upwards rather than down.
Any other questions? Thank you to all for this. This is not a good session, and this week has been really enlightening and makes us think. So thank you to all for this.
Thanks.
Russell, next. Are you ready to follow with something really?
No. So I missed that. Ready to go with something exciting?
You're lucky.
Well, I don't want that much wait. Good evening, everyone. I've been asked to come and present the results of our 3-year school calendar survey. As you know, we are in the tail end of our last section of 3-year school calendars, going into the new one. So, the board's primary way of consulting for the school calendar is a survey that we put out. And that survey has been out now since February 1st until February 23rd and closed last Friday. We had a total of 203 people complete the survey, which was actually pretty considerable given school calendars. I do want to talk a little bit to the survey and how I analyzed it, which is also going to play into the budget survey. So both of those surveys closed on the same day. So if I talk about it now, I don't need to talk about it later as well. With both surveys, what I did is I took the raw data, I downloaded it, and then I analyzed that data for trends, for comments that had come in from the community and from our staff. So those trends then were summarized in both PowerPoints, but I do have available to the board that raw data with all those comments and the summarized data as well. but both presentations reflect the summarization of those analyzed comments. So, for our first question that we had on the survey was, what is your involvement with the Cowichan Valley School District? That question originally asked you to select one, or to select as many as you wanted to identify yourself. However, I appeared to have selected the wrong question, and the ability to do that was not present in that survey, so you could select one position. So most people identified as being a parent in the school district. 7 out of 10 of our survey respondents identified as such. When we looked at the survey and analyzed those comments, the overarching summary was that people were really concerned about trends in Pro-D days, or NI days, and for those to be strategically scheduled, and also looking at alignment with family schedules and in terms of our breaks, winter and spring. So there's a little bit more information on that as we go through the survey, but those are the primary ones. So for question 1, were you in favor of the proposed 2024-25 district calendar? 64% said yes, 22% said no, and then when I built the graphic, I built it wrong. So at the bottom there where it says no answer is 13%, that actually should be on the blue, not on the yellow. So my apologies for that. That does translate through the other 3 slides as well. So for question 2, are you in favor of the 25-26 district school calendar? 62% said yes, 19% said no, and no answer was also about 19%. And then finally, for the final year, so the 26-27 district calendar, 56% said yes, 25% said no, and then no answer was also present in there. And again, I flipped that red number, so my apologies on that. When we looked at all those comments, they predominantly had to do with the timing of our breaks. People, I think we had a little bit of carryover from this year's Christmas break. That was pretty evident in the comments, where not too many people were happy with being off school and work 2 days before Christmas. So that did show up in our comments. The same, as a preface for this, the same question was asked of all these school calendars. Are you in favor of it, and do you have any comments of it? So the same trends came in all 3 sections, and those ones are put together in this bit of a comment summary. Thank you, Jason. So the breaks were a popular topic, as they were concerned about learning loss. There was, as Jeff was just talking about, the summer learning and the learning loss there, so there was concern about that. And then the times that students spent out of school are a financial burden. That was replicated when they talked about spring break as well, and spring break and the district closure, both in terms of staff and families relaying that is a financial burden to them. The big one as well was also making sure that our district breaks are in alignment across the island. Some parents might work in Nanaimo, have kids here. There's all different sorts of things that can happen, so they're looking for that consistency and approach. So all this information has been forwarded off to the team for looking at in the calendar inclusion in that. So.
Trustee Schmidt.
How many surveys were filled out?
203 on that one. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Trustee Souza.
Thanks, Mike. A couple of questions. One, was the 203 sort of spread out across the district, or was there more of a focus? I'm curious about that. If there was more of an uptake, say, in one area versus another.
It's a good question, but we don't track them geographically. We track them time-wise, and as always with every one of our surveys, the first day is huge, and then it just this nice slope, unless I re-promote it, or Deepak promotes it for me, in which case you get a bump again. Okay. Yeah.
And then the second question was, how do these results compare to the last set of, because you were saying this is usually the way you sort of consult on the calendar, so do you have the data from the previous 3-year results, and how do the two compare, not only in terms of numbers of people, but is that the general trend as well, that with every increasing year there's less and less satisfaction?
I didn't do a comparative analysis between the last survey results and these. I do remember though by doing it that breaks have always been a very hot topic. I know last time we did it, we talked about the spring break and aligning it with other districts. We were fresh out of COVID. We had that dissonance with other districts. So I remember that from the survey, but I didn't do that comparative analysis.
Trustee Strachan.
I'm curious in that 3rd year, because the first 2 years went from like 60 something, and that 3rd year was, I think you said 56%. Was there anything that stood out to you as to why that third year was off?
In the comments, there wasn't, but in the structure of the year, there is a little bit of a change. It's a shorter year that year, so our days are squeezed in. I know one of the things we've had to do in that is give up one of our non-instructional days. So that calendar has squeezed in a bit, and that is the predominant difference between those three. Is the first two have a bit of a longer year, last one is shorter.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And just a little history, Trustee Dominus, when we put in that 1 week district closure, it wasn't popular then and it's still not popular. So, but the other pieces are all contractual through the collective agreement, so there's nothing we can do about the other pieces anyway.
Thanks, George. So, what's next then? So given these results, I mean, does that change anything in terms of, I know there are, of course, collective agreement sort of, commitments and whatnot, but does anything change as a result of the survey?
Well, I'd have to leave that to the superintendent.
At this point in time, the next steps will be that the calendar will be brought to the next board meeting with a recommendation for the board to consider approving the 3-year calendar. And I do want to make a comment because I think that one thing you don't have is the calendars in front of you like you have had in the past, maybe even about a month ago, but we forget quite easily. But there's some parameters around that calendar development with regard to some of our collective agreements. And so that third year, that is the reason that there's a challenge, because we have to meet the mandate around instructional minutes. We have contractual language that creates some limitations. And so therefore, there's really not a lot of movement. And I think that the major feedback from the parent community was around aligning the non-instructional days on Fridays so that it can meet the family need around that. So, and to your response to that data analysis, I know that this represented very closely the last 3-year calendar, around 65% almost approval rate.
Okay. So might we see a shift then to Friday? Is that the idea? Like in terms of like taking into account or considering these results?
The calendar actually shows that. A lot of our non-instructional days are on Friday.
Okay. Thank you.
So when we bring it back to you next week at our board meeting or 2 weeks from now, you can look at those calendars and see if that feedback reflects that at that time.
Anything else? Thank you very much, Mr. Russell.
Jennifer's hand is still.
Oh, Jennifer's. Trustee Strachan.
Sure. No, I don't know. I obviously didn't pull it down. Hold on a sec.
Okay.
There we go.
With her hand.
Okay, thanks. All right. Cowichan Secondary, Watson Secondary Transitional Plan. Mr. Hoff.
Mike, what did you do?
Gotta welcome the new guy in.
Wow, yeah, thanks. Good evening. I'm here to share some ideas around closing celebrations of Cowichan Secondary and opening celebrations for Cowichan Secondary. First grad class was 1951, so I imagine this was photos taken maybe 1947, considering they're using wheelbarrows to pour the cement. But I share this as there's a rich history in this school, and it's important that we bridge between Cowichan Secondary and Cowichan Secondary. And so one of our ideas, because we've had a lot of communication and feedback saying, when are we going to get in the building? Can we have a final walk? Can we see it one more time? And so an idea that we have here is during the final week of school, well, it still looks like a school before we've moved a lot of items out and teachers have started moving items out and packing up. We want people to have a chance to see it as a school. And so in that last week, I proposed date currently would be the Thursday, the 20th, inviting community in, and beforehand, asking them to send photos of their time in Cowichan Secondary, or even if they're not in the photos of Cowichan Secondary of the site, and running a slideshow of the memories presented to us. And then setting it to a backdrop of audio clips of notable graduates over the years, whether that is local Indigenous leaders, local politicians, Olympian graduates, and so identifying some notable graduates to set a voice to the backdrop of the photos. Following that event, having our leadership students at Cowichan Secondary lead groups of community through the school for a final walk, so that they can have that time and seeing it as a school. In regards to closing a school in a proper way with Cowichan tribes, Elder Dolly has connected with elders, and at this time they don't believe that anything needs done with this particular building, but they're still looking into that. But at this time, it does not look like that needs to be done. Looking forward to Cowichan Secondary. How do we open this, and how do we celebrate? How do we bridge the rich tradition to the new? And so some ideas and some things that have been brought up in. There was an advisory committee meeting. In some ways, like, this is a big talk of the town. We hear about these not just through committee meetings. And one of these is the tree, the large willow tree in front. It's not confirmed which grad class planted it, and my understanding is there is some controversy. Multiple groups are laying claim to the planting.
57 in the class of 58.
62's in there too, I think.
So what we've done is last year we took cuttings from the tree and we planted them in soil and propagated them. So what we'd like to do is invite the grads of the early years and others to come, and at Cowichan Secondary, the design builder has selected a spot that will be irrigated in its early years to ensure the tree is established, and have those groups come over and be a part of a ceremony planting it. So this tree continues to grow for another 70 years. We also have heard a lot about the graduate composites and how we honor those and put them up. What we're looking at right now is having them taken and digitally scanned, or what we're trying right now is we're taking them out of the frames and laying them with a camera to have a photo image, and then see if we can do that digitally. The problem with the scanning is that when you go back, they're cut out photos, and so they're quite delicate. So we're looking at preserving them that way, and then presenting them in the school through a TV loop or some other means digitally. And the advantage of that is too, then we could put them on our website, and that way you don't have to be here to see them. You can go back and show your children, grandchildren, etc.
I have a 4x8 coroplast photo of the class of '82 in my crawl space that I would gladly donate.
And that may come in handy because there are some years missing. So I think the 73 years of graduates, I went through and did the math at one point, I counted them all. There's just random selections where they're missing, and I think that was due to damage and of some type over the years.
My husband will love you if I can get rid of that.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
No, I'd be happy to add it too. We also have a lot of students that contributed towards an art project led by Linda Folks, a retired teacher, and these are displayed on the outside of our current building, and they're mural mosaics. There are about 19 of them. I had some photos taken so there's a selection or sampling of them. But each one of these tiles would represent a student who contributed to the mosaic. It was then put up each year. And we don't necessarily have the space of the current secondary. It doesn't necessarily match the motif of the current secondary. And the backing of them, some of them, it's rotting. They're mounted on plywood. So what we're looking at doing with the design builder currently is identifying some of them that are in good enough condition to be taken down and put up at the new school site. The second piece we're looking at doing is the photography class has gone, they've done this for me. So they've taken photos of all of them and framed them nicely. And so what we're looking at doing is getting something like a shadow box. And just like with art, you have a mat around the photo. So the photos become the mat, taking one of the tiles and putting it in the center of the shadow box, and then having the story of the creating of them, why it's significant, who contributed, and then taking that shadow box and putting it up in Cowichan Secondary, in Cowichan Secondary. As opening comes, we're looking currently at the last week of August in hopefully having a ribbon cutting ceremony. A lot of people have contributed to the opening. It's governmental organizations have all been a part of this. So having a ribbon cutting ceremony. As part of this, we would also, when we asked, seeked advice from elders around how do you properly open a building, how do you bless a building? And we did the ground blessing at the opening, the first shovel dig, there's a term for that.
Groundbreaking.
The groundbreaking, thanks, I knew it was in there somewhere. At the groundbreaking, there was the blessing done there. And so for the school itself, the Cinqua blessed the school through their dance and their drumming. So hiring Cinqua to come in and be part of the ribbon cutting ceremony, and that is the blessing. Also looking at having that ceremony, but then also students, while they'll certainly be invited to that ceremony, community, having on the first day of school another ribbon cutting ceremony with students, having board and you all be invited, and having that ceremony there again with Cinqua dancers, and having the student feel that they're in now. They've been waiting for this. You've all been waiting longer, but you know, they have that reality of they're going to get to be in there and learning. So having that day for them, as well as so this was my slide for that one. Sorry. On the first day, what we do each year at Cow High is we meet out on the field, and we meet in our home rooms, and we do a welcome, usually performed by Cinqua. And we have a local leader come in and speak to the kids and welcome them in. So this is a sample of what it often looks like on our field. And then last, what we're looking at doing is community wants in too. So they want to see the new building. So we're looking at the 4th week of September. And the reason that being is we can then have students lead. And we can have the students showcase the building. We can have students explain how they're already making the school part of, like, what is the culture they're creating within our building? How do they use the spaces? And people want to hear that from kids, not me walking around talking. So if we do this 4th week of September, students will have been acclimated to the building. They'll know how they're using it, and they'll be comfortable sharing. And that is my presentation.
Questions, Trustee Schmidt?
Just a couple things. So the ribbon cutting ceremony on August 26th to the 30th was the date to be announced. I'm wondering about all the dignitaries, and I'm very cautious to remind us that we have other trustees that are no longer sitting at this table that were a part of the original build in 2008 that really should be a part of this. And I'm talking about Trustee DeGroot and Trustee Spilsbury. So I think that that would be a great time that maybe the dignitaries have a tour of the school, and it not just be a ribbon cutting, because I think that they were a part of the beginning stages of all of this, So maybe our MLAs and yada yada yada, whoever's there, government, I'm sure everybody's going to want to let that school before the kids go in. So I'm asking if you could please maybe consider letting the dignitaries that come to the ribbon opening be able to tour the school. I know that there's also an online survey going out from one of the teachers at Cal High regarding graduates. I know I got one from the class of '87.
Yearbook.
Yes, yearbook, because it's the final yearbook. Yeah, so so I know that the emails are out to do the final yearbook with all of us. Did you get one? Yeah. So did you get one? Okay. So I think that that's pretty cool that that we've all been sent something as well. But I really would like to be able to give those that were a part of this from the beginning, both ministry and money, everything else. I think that we just need to be really, we just need to open the doors a little bit earlier to those that need to really get a good look and be able to, so we can also be thankful for them being able to give us this amazing school that kiddos can learn in. I just think it's important. So if you can consider that for number 4 for the 26th to the 30th, that'd be great.
Trustee Thorne, Trustee Croft.
I really appreciate everything you've shown us, but I have to go back to protocol. Normally, the ground has already been blessed. It's already been danced on. So what I see, if I was back in the older days, you'd have the singers, maybe some of the dancers, and you have all of the dignitaries leading the students to the door, and then going to the side, because that school belongs to the students. We would not, it wouldn't be right to dance them in.
Trustee Croft.
Thank you. Well, it's been a challenge to figure that out. It's amazing. Thank you. So I have another day job at the Couch and Arts Council. And I'll just let you know that there are artists who want to get their hands on the rubble from the mosaics and make something. I have made no commitment. I am only relaying that. And it could have a very cool potential. So if you got boxes of mosaic rubble, apparently we'll take them. And I don't envy the guest list. I got an earful not too long ago about people who were not invited to the announcement when the minister was here a few years ago. So anyway, if any of us can help you navigate any of that or support you on that, I know Robin will let us know. And yeah, I think you pulled together a lot of very complicated pieces into a really lovely package.
Trustee Lise and then Trustee Souza.
I don't have a name.
Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, this is shaping up wonderfully, so thank you for putting this together. And I agree with all the previous comments that have been made. And in fact, I'm glad Trustee Croft mentioned this, which is the murals, and that was exactly something that I wanted to ask about. So when we started talking about this and kind of probing the idea of saving the murals, there wasn't really much of an uptake at that point, so I'm really, really glad to see that there is actually an effort to try and preserve what can be preserved by way of sort of evaluating with the builder and that photographing the others. But I would love to see, maybe it's a call out, and to the artistic community, a call out to them to come and rescue, like in a safe sort of way, what cannot be sort of saved and transferred to the new school. Because there's so much meaning. I didn't go to this school, but clearly there's so much meaning around murals, and they're beautiful. And if something could emerge out of the ones that can't be saved, I think that could be a fabulous project and part of the history of the new school ultimately as well. So it's kind of wanting to support Trustee Croft on this and see what might be possible.
Trustee Schmidt.
May I ask, only because I have a kiddo that did some of those. Are they actually labeled, like which student did which? Because I was under the understanding they were. But it'd be really cool if the artists that actually made them had an opportunity as well, because those kids were I'm just curious if they were actually labeled with names, or if the artists came, or the kiddos from the day came forward and one was gonna be taken down in maybe, let's say, a rougher kind of way. If maybe those individuals wanna try and save their own art, maybe they can. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, the clay tiles on this one, I can see names
Oh, you
on
can?
them.
Okay.
Not all of them, but some. The mirror mosaics, no.
Not
But
much.
I do have it was the unveiling ceremony for one of the years. I have a program for that. And in that program, it does have that year's mosaic, and it does have a legend of which student contributed to each.
Okay, cool.
I will maybe I'll ask, maybe see if we can get Linda Folks or maybe some of the other teachers, do they have access, where were those programs created? Because that is potentially something that could be dug up. Just thought, just to get us.
I just want to thank Darcy for the work that he's put into this, and also that there's a lot of work to be done around a new school, and I know that we dream big in our beautiful community. And I say we dream big because I know that the work that needs to happen and the number of things that need to go on in the next very few months, that I caution us that we want to probably maybe stay in a bit of a wide highway, but at the same time knowing that there's a lot of things to do around what has to happen. And so I would encourage us to think about the many responsibilities that Director Hoff has right now and so perhaps we will be looking at volunteers within his community, his realm, to do some of the wonderful notions that are here. So I just want to caution the board that there's so much work to be done and a very limited group of people to make this all happen within a frame of time. Because I think we have some really great creative ideas, and I would like to think about how we can maybe do some of that, maybe with other hands that could actually work toward that endeavor. So I just know that what I see here unto itself is a huge amount of work, along with what has to happen in the next 6 months.
Me first.
I just wanted to reply to that, that's all.
Oh, go ahead.
The only reason why I'm bringing this up is because on a daily basis, as a born and raised Cowichan Valley girl, I am constantly being hammered by the pictures on the walls that are going to be no longer on the walls. That's very important to people in this community, and the artwork on the school. A constant hammering. So I know that you're cautioning the board, but I know I'm getting an awful lot of flack. So if I can give something back by saying, this is where your class will be on the website, like, that would be so cool, because then everybody can go and see their classes on the website. But if I could say we'll make the best attempt possible to pull down the murals, like just something so that the board doesn't have to take heat when that school closes, because we know there's a lot of passionate people that had really great times in Cal High, and we had great graduations there, and we have great memories there, and I just want to make sure that everybody feels honored and taken care of. That's all.
First of all, the date of the week of August 26th to 30th, having a ribbon cutting ceremony. That's a really slow week. It's also last week of summer when a lot of dignitaries are out of town. It's a slow news week, and it's a question who you're getting in. So I would suggest you maybe talk to Mike, who probably maybe get a better feel for that and see if that's appropriate, because we do want to make a big splash. So having a closeout party is great, and I know a few of the older graduates, the class of 57 and 58.
Yep. They are a rowdy bunch.
If you need any help, actually I will forward on a couple of names to you. You might want to pick their brain a little bit. They want to help, including one who wants to do a history of the old school and the new school. And I'm gonna forward that on to you. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna approach staff, because that might be an interesting student project, or something the elders of the community could work with the youngsters of the community on. So I'll forward that name to you, and and they're willing to do the heavy lifting too, so I think I found that quite interesting. The photos. I'm going to challenge anybody who graduated at that school, when they walk into that building, before they leave, they go look at their pictures. And they go look at the pictures of the class before and the class after. And I know when we first talked about the design of this new school, and one of the things that came up is the pictures. And I know I was told that the pictures would be going to the new school. And we're gonna have, I'm gonna be sad not to see the pictures there, because it is a big draw. When you go through that old school, like I said, it's a big draw. When people go in for, any of the scholarship nights or whatever, people don't go in through, if they go in through the gym door, they exit out the main door because they want to go look at their pictures. And so it's kind of disappointing to me not to be able to see those pictures there, because that is our history. So, on that, any other comments? Trustee Susan and then Trustee Lisa.
Yes, thank you. And just quickly, and yeah, for sure, recognizing that you're doing double duty and you've got a lot on your plate in terms of that. Like, I'm hoping you have an organizing committee with you on this, right? So that it's kind of, so I'm curious about that. You do have support, capacity.
There's a team.
Okay, there's a team, okay.
Cheryl's on her way back.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I just didn't want to overwhelm, just to make sure that this is actually what we're suggesting to actually doable as well. And if it's not, what support do you need to the earlier points around it that maybe we can provide or something? Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just have a question, and that's around capacity. And when I'm thinking about that last week of August and everything that has to take place in that last week of August, my question is, as a dignitary, if I may be one, I would be just as happy to be there the day the school opens and the students go in, instead of having a separate celebration or opening for dignitaries, and then to go and participate in the open house when it is. So for me, you could eliminate one and I'd be happy to, but it's just thinking of your capacity, and I can only imagine what you're going to be going through in that last week. So I don't know if it's a must do or not. It's just a personal perspective.
Superintendent.
I think that there are a lot of people involved with the new school, and I think that there's so many things that are going on, and I do appreciate the thought of that, because I am concerned around the team and the amount of energy and effort that's being stretched out there around their regular responsibilities along with additional ones. But it is important to have the traditions of the past, and how do we actually honor the past as we move to the future. And I think at the end of the day that you try to do the best you can around providing an overall plan. And the idea here was for information to get the board's feedback, so that we can really go through some of the details of this and see what we can do around that. Because I think that it is very challenging to start a new day, beginning of school, but we can make some accommodations around that. So we'll work to that end and look at the feedback that the board's given Darcy today and go from there.
Chair, I'm just aware that we have a public budget meeting that starts in 6 minutes, and I'm curious if we have any public outside or if we can continue this meeting. That was my way of a hint, wasn't it? What a dog you lost her. Which night is the fashion? Pardon me? public, then.
I'll stand, there's nobody there, but I'll stand there for about 5 minutes.
So, Chair, may I ask Mr. Russell that just let us know if public does show, and then maybe we can adjourn the meeting, Mr. Sandquist?
Alternatively, what I do have here is a budget presentation in the balance of the BEBC agenda. It isn't exactly what I had intended for the public, but if they were to come in and the meeting was continuing, I could just briefly go into the presentation that I had as well prepared for them.
Also, Mr. Drummond, we bypassed the meeting time that the board was supposed to have from 5:45 to 6 o'clock, and I'm curious, no, why did this meeting last so long? We only have one school this time. I'm wondering if the board would be willing to hang on after the budget presentation for 5 minutes, because it'll take maybe 5 minutes to have the meeting that we missed at 5:45. Would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So since we have no public, new and revised administrative procedures.
All right, if I can draw the board's attention to 6.5 on pages 10 to 16, you will see that we have some adjustments in our administrative procedures. I think the first one, AP 169, we have been able to create an AP on identity, belonging, and connection. This is the AP that complements our policy. This is a new AP to codify the consultative work that supports the creation of positive and inclusive learning environments. And I think what I want to share with the board is that we brought together a team of principals and vice principals to work with myself and Director of Communications, Mike Russell. They went back and they worked with kids and got sample ideas with regard to what does identity mean, what does belonging mean, and what does connection mean. And so an AP is really a procedure. You can see it there on page 11, so it is new. And so we even have some examples around what does it mean to support identity, and what does it mean to support belonging and connection. And some of those examples actually came from the work that we did with students. And so we're very excited that we now have our new identity, belonging, and connection AP to actually supplement our policy. Secondly, AP 354, our lead person there was Associate Superintendent Darlene Reynolds around physical restraint and seclusion of students. We have revised our AP, and it is revised to align with the current practices and ministry guidelines. And it also is revised to align with current district nonviolent response practices. So you will also see in that AP that there are a number of shifts and adjustments with regard to how we operate physical restraint and seclusion of students, and it is in alignment now with the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And so we do a lot of training with regard to this as well. And as you know, these APs go to our principals and our vice principals, and they're advertised so that our entire educational community knows that there's been a change of practice and our new AP for them to be a participant in.
Any questions?
Thank you. Just a question with regards to AP 354, physical restraint and seclusion. I'm just curious, and I think it's kind of there sort of implicitly and whatnot, but I just don't see the words, and that is, given the matter at hand, if this has been, and I know it's in alignment with ministry guidelines, would you consider this to be a trauma-informed approach?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I want to make a comment about identity, belonging, and connection, because I'm sure most people hear about it, especially down south. It comes up quite a bit in the schools and stuff like this. And anti-racism policies, and which that's kind of negative, and this is such a positive thing. So once again, all the people who built this, thank you. And next, Mr. Mr. Santos.
Thank you. I guess we're also starting the public meeting. So if any of our public wish to provide me additional feedback, we'll have these feedback forms following the presentations that we'll have here. But back to the BEBC agenda. The first item that I have here are year-end projections. As the board know, we regularly track where we think our budgets are going to land at a very, very high level for trustees, to have an understanding of what surplus may or may not occur at the end of the year. Right now, we are tracking in our, well, that's really hard to see. I'm going to expand it a bit so you can see it. Right now, we are tracking in our revenues at approximately $237,000 ahead. The main reason for that is related to interest revenues. So those are still very, very strong. As you know, Bank of Canada rates. And for every 0.25% that those go up, the board earns $50,000 more than over the annualized. If they go down, and I'm going to show you that on 7.5, what is about to happen with our rates, they will lose $50,000 a year. So anyway, that's where we're tracking on revenues right now, which is very, very close to budget at $109 million. On expenses, looking at all the variations within salaries, we are very close. We're at about $123,000 ahead. Very close to the line. That statistically is really nothing compared to a $78 million budget. We have some overs, we have some unders, and overall, there's where we're at. We're going to get even closer on benefits. We're tracking at $39,000 on a $19 million budget. So those are the salaries as of February 15th when we did our projections. Scrolling down a bit more here, a little bit under on our insurance accounts and utilities. We're actually tracking ahead this year than last year. I think it was warmer overall, a relatively warm winter being an El Nino year. It was wet, we did have a cold snap, but overall we didn't really have sustained cold. And I think December was the warmest December on record, if I'm right. That's reflected in our utilities rate. So I'm actually going to come a little bit ahead there. So bottom line, $343,000 projected surplus on $109 million expenditure added to the 230-ish up above provides us with a projected surplus of $580,000 as of February 15th, and we'll continue to update this as we move through the budget process this year. Mr. Chair, we have a question?
Oh, Trustee Schmidt.
Through the chair to Mr. Sanquist. Mr. Sanquist, where were we at this point last year as far as surplus? Do you know?
I believe we were around 480.
So we're up a little bit from last year? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'm going to move into our enrollment estimate. This is really where the budget starts. On February 15th, we were required to submit an estimate of the number of students that are projected for next year in the school district. In the 2023-2024 column, which is the first one on the left, that is where we are at this year. With the September count being actual and the February and May counts, which I'll scroll down to here in a minute, just so I can keep this large enough for everybody to see, still being estimates. So the green column is what the district has projected for 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27. The white column beside it is what the ministry has projected. So the district, we are projecting an increase over last year of 71.94 FTE. The ministry's demographers thought we would go down by about 41. Moving into the next year, so you're going to see some stabilization here. We're projecting an increase of 26.58 FTE. And the ministry thought we'd drop by another 85. And then the next year, we're projecting almost exactly the same enrollment, down 2.62 FTE, and the ministry thinks we would drop another 57. So this is based on birth rates, in-migration rates, transition rates, capture rates, and graduation rates. And so this is, majority of this has come from Beauregard. We have double tested our K enrollment. And I know I'm turning into a broken record, but we know we've had the lowest birth rates in 5 years in our community, and those are translated into our kindergarten numbers. And I'll show you, if we get to the public presentation at all, how that bubble is moving through our grades. I actually have the projection for each year of our grades, and they are larger at the up. There's a wave. And unless we see birth rates turn around or people start to move to our community, we're not going to see enrollment growth. Down, after we consulted with inclusive education, some slight drops in level 2 and level 3 designation numbers. So the ministry projections are simply based on formula, and we had a spike this year, so they took that percentage, and that's why they think we'll have 572 level 2s and 618, not realistic numbers. We think from discussions with Inclusive Ed, 499. If anything changes on these before we finish budget, we can make manual adjustments, but this is where we think we are right now, and we'll have another opportunity to submit enrollment projections by the end of the year. Indigenous education, we're kind of holding that as a flat line. We actually had a really small K cohort. We figured out why, but there is some stability now showing up in Indigenous education numbers overall in our enrollment. And then moving into February, we have upped those projections just based on realistic expectations of our counts. So they were dropped this year for what was thought to be a reduction in basically in our dual credit programs and in our number of online learners. But dual credit is opening up again in many, well, it's being expanded as far as what's out for eligibility of student courses. So we're seeing some new policy change provincially on that, and we're reflecting that here. So overall, 71.94 is without a crystal ball, the best estimate for next year. We've been up about 100 this year, I think about 103, so it's not that far off. That's what we're basing the budget on. Any questions on enrollment? Okay, here is what we think is going to happen this year. In your package, you have a budget preview document. It's quite lengthy, but I do need to go through it with the board in reasonable detail so that you understand what we think we're facing as we move into next year's budget. And I think what I'd just like to start with is we have had our provincial budget announcement last week. So there was the lockdown, and we do know there are some significant things that have come out of that budget in relation to education. The first being $30.3 million for learner supports over the next 3 years. So if we're approximately 1.5% of the province, that we could assume that's likely going to be another $150,000 a year to help students with diverse learning needs. So I don't know what that looks like. Nobody does yet. It's just money in the budget that's coming. We've also seen the restoration of the Student and Family Affordability Fund. So that is different than Feeding Futures, and we don't yet know what that looks like or what those dollars are, or whether they're taking some Feeding Futures money or giving boards full discretion over it in the way the boards had during Student and Family Affordability Fund. Nice. But it's new and information to come. So I think those are two significant things that I didn't have captured in this document when I created it. The first part is just all stuff. Oh, sorry.
So you said we're getting $150,000 for unique student needs.
My best guess.
So, but we already spent $5 million over what we already received, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And it may be, I don't know, it may come to a special purpose grant and be targeted to a very specific purpose. I'm not sure what it is yet.
And Clink is still intact?
Don't know. Assuming. The funding announcement will be out on March the 15th, and we will learn about all of those pots of money. But significant here in this budget announcement is there has been no funding for inflationary adjustments. So that's still left with boards. So there's no new money. The money that has come into the budget has come in for wages. And we have some other pressures that are related to wages that are not going to be considered within that ministry funding envelope within this provincial budget. And that's what I want to tell you about. Okay. So I talked about, oh, here it is. Here's that great slide I had about grade level. I was talking about the wave. So this is where we think we'll have September 30th by grade. The smaller K cohorts starting to come in, and you can see the wave, and then it goes out, and it's high in 11 and 12 based on the 5 and 6 year, or the 6-year graduation rate. So that happens to leave students in those two grades a little bit longer than getting through. but that's a wave. And you can see the smaller numbers coming in than what is about to be going out. 5, 6 being probably the 2 big cohorts that are now working, they're going to be working their way into secondary very soon, unless something changes. We also see our funded school age enrollment by year. So here is what's been, this is going way back. So 2001, 2002, check out that enrollment, almost 10,000 students in 2001, 2002, roughly when I started here. And it dropped at about 300 students a year until it bottomed out down in 2014, 2015. We remember the years of funding protection because we were dropping so fast we had to have supplemental funding to maintain the operations of this district. That was consistent. That was common. That's a demographic shift that happened in our province. It's consistent. Now we're coming back, and we came back really quickly. When we hit the bottom, we bounced right back at about those 200 or so a year until we hit about 2018, 2019 and began that period of some more stabilization. The green bar, light green bar is where we think we are going to be this year, and then the other green bars are just sort of that kind of leveling off now of that enrollment. We also have seen rapid increases in number of students with designations. So if you were to add those 3 bars together, you get that blue line at the top. And you can see how that area of need in the school district has grown significantly over the last number of years. But I've just left the numbers as stable after this year, making that assumption. Under expenditures, there will be funded expenditure pressures and there will be unfunded expenditure pressures. So, support staff collective agreements that were renegotiated on July 1st, 2022, those were for teachers and for USW and for CUPE. They will see a wage increase next year between 2 and 3%. I'm positive it's going to be 3% because there's a 1% component tied to inflation, and that is going to come through separate funding once we receive. It's not going to be part of our March 15th announcement. So we're going to estimate what that is, and we're going to budget for that figure. There's also, I got that part. Okay, principals and vice principals not covered by a collective agreement, and exempt staff, we don't know yet whether they're going to be part of an increase or not part of a funded increase, and I think that's something that we're going to have to consider as we build the budget. I'm going to anticipate they've begun a little bit of a trend with the last 2 years, but we don't know yet. Do you? No, we have a question or comment.
Can you remind me what the cost was that the board put out for the principals, vice principals last year? I know we topped that up.
Yeah, it was pretty much, most of it was funded.
Yeah. But what was that amount?
I think it was $473,000. But that was a significant increase of 6.75, so kind of half that, and you get an idea of what the increases would be for that group to keep pace with support staff and teachers. So we don't know yet. I'm going to assume, likely at this point, we're going to know that on March 15th. Or later. We may actually not know that until April. Last year we didn't budget for those increases because we didn't know about whether we were going to have approval or not. Not funded, teachers have increments. They move up with their wage scale, allowing for their experience to be recognized through their careers. The board will likely have to find those funds, which is normal. It's usually somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. We see our post-pandemic absenteeism replacement costs higher than pre-pandemic. There's a cultural shift overall around staying home if you're sick versus previous times when everybody came to work was sick and made everybody sick. And there's a cost related to that. Certainly, we need to be. We're currently tracking okay. So when I showed you the projection up to February 15th, we're tracking pretty well, which isn't telling me that this year is worse than last year because our wage costs are 6.75% higher. So it's probably actually better than last year overall. At least the people that we were able to replace, because this cost is just who we're actually able to replace, and we know we have EA shortages, etc. Canada Pension Plan premiums. So this is a new one. Last year it went up from 5.7% to 5.95%, but now there's a new rate of 4% that applies to earnings between $70,100 and $74,900. So that's now going to come into play with most of our teachers who have wages around that area and anybody higher. And then for 25-26, that ceiling goes up to $82,700. So then we're going to have about another $10,000 that we're going to be paying 4% premiums on for that employee, for those employee groups. So that's a trend that's coming around CPP benefits. WorkSafe BC rates, you know, our 2022 claims experience, we mentioned this before last year, it exceeded the previous 2 years by a factor of 3. That's going to remain in the rate because it takes 3 years for it to roll out. That is, I need to do a little bit more work around the 2023 data and see how that may fall into there as well. And then how about opening a new high school, a new secondary school in the fall of 2024? We may need to be budgeting for some moving costs because the capital project itself doesn't pay to get the boxes from one building to the other building. So another consideration there. Moving into inflation, I talked, you know, last year the board had a benefit premium holiday of $156,797. That was related to some dental premiums. That is not expected this year. We've got the preliminary estimates on QP and USW for extended health and dental. And QP's rates are currently going up by 7.44% and USW by 13.3%. So that's inflation based, not so much usage, but the cost of services that people are accessing. So right there is, you know, we're losing $156,000 in premium holiday, and we're going to be paying another $156,000 in new rates. Without knowing the teachers yet, those rates are not yet available. I would have to think the trends will continue through all of our employee groups, principals and vice principals. Fuel rates remain quite high, but they are appearing to have stabilized. I think we all would see that at the gas pump. We also now have 3 electric school buses, but any savings we get from those buses gets put, for 2 of them, gets put towards the loan with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. So we're able to actually pay for those buses through the savings on the diesel fuel, which was a great program. And then inflation rates are, of course, they are slowing down. We are seeing inflation for the first time drop below 3% in the province of British Columbia. So that's a trend where that is helpful for us. Capital, currently don't see the need for more portables at this time, but we definitely need to be paying attention to Francis, Kelsey, Lake Cowichan, and Chemaina Secondary as we look at long-term projections. Those bubbles of students that I showed you that were coming through are going to land in secondary school very soon, and those schools are going to see that potential capacity pressure. Predominantly Francis, Kelsey, Lake Cowichan should have space, and Chemaina Secondary should have space. And then we're still upgrading our financial software. We have a few more modulars to come, and that was already a commitment. And we are in year 3 of the 5-year custodial equipment replacement plan and year 2 of the operations equipment replacement budget plan. So those are just continuations that are in the budget. Other considerations, just carrying these over, we know early learning, literacy, and before and after school care are still priorities. In past years, we have a number of trades positions that have been doing capital work, and as that work changes and needs to shift more to operating, we need to be thinking about those number of employees that are in one fund versus another, more of a shell game. Still have reconciliation with local First Nations as a priority of the board, but also a new budget guiding principle to intentionally target funds towards resources aimed at increasing Indigenous student graduation rates. So we need to start to develop a plan for how that could look in the budget. And then there are all those additional investments that the board has made over the last couple of years around increasing assessments and mental health supports, and they'll be rolled over into the base of the new budget. Now, I wish this column was bigger, where it says savings, and I have a 1 line here.
Well, you're full of good news tonight, my friend.
I'll try. Savings, there was a one-time transfer to local capital with the purposes of creating office space. That doesn't have to happen necessarily in the next year's budget, and that would take the budget down by $250,000. Okay. So revenues, 98% comes from the Ministry of Education and Child Care and our LEAs. That isn't changing. We're going to get those grants on March 15th, 2024. And that comes in through a formula. So about 90% is tied to FTE. So we are going to see additional revenue because we're going to have those other 70-ish students that are going to be coming in. Other ongoing grants, expect to receive your student transportation grant. That's here to ensure that boards don't charge families for attending or for riding the school bus. If you were to do that, we would lose that funding. So that's why it's here, because most boards started to move that direction. And then we also have our pay equity, which was introduced way back in 2001 and hasn't been adjusted for any inflation since that date. We see our international student program enrollment just really quite stable. European markets have been impacted by very high levels of inflation, but there's a lot of new markets such as South America that are being explored. And then investment revenue. This is where I've been talking about how every 0.25%, the board's interest revenues went from 200,000 and something last year to a budget of 750 this year. We're going to need to be thinking about the sustainability of that. You know, as the Bank of Canada begins to hint about decreasing prime lending rates or lending rates, there could be an impact on the board's investment revenue that will need to be factored into this budget. Surplus, we're drawing it down. Still 3.1 million in unrestricted operating surplus. That's about 3% right now. Oh, got a question.
Sorry. Back to investment revenue. Can you tell us with the Ministry of Finance, that 0.2%, can you tell me again what we'll be losing in revenue? Approximately?
Yeah. Well, they're going to drop the rate by 0.25%, so it should be roughly 50-ish per year.
50,000 a year? Okay.
And then we see, well, it's actually probably more than that, now that I think about it. Did they drop it by 1/4 or by 0.5%, Claudia? I think it was half. 0.5%. Sorry, 0.5%. So no, it's about 100,000 a year.
100,000 a year. Thank you.
So looking at surplus, 3.1 million, and I've showed you 580,000, which should put the board at about 3.25% of budget, sitting in surplus at the end of the year projected. So to date, here's what the board has been up to. You have adopted budget guiding principles. The survey's been out. You'll see some feedback on it here. Lots of liaison meetings, great feedback from all the partners at those meetings. That'll be consolidated for you at some point. We are in the budget meeting that's being held right now, February 27th. So whatever feedback, if anybody gives any, we'll come to you. And then in the next steps, later this week, the budget team are meeting to start to begin to finalize our expenditure estimates. Claudia and team have been doing a lot of work in getting everything up to date on what we know, those pressures that we know, because we need to be pretty much ready before spring break as far as our expenditures, so that when the revenues come in, we know we're ready to go. Then the BEBC will begin their work on March 26th with the hopes of budget adoption on or around May 7th, which is our regularly scheduled board meeting. And the budget does need to be in by June 30th, but for staffing purposes, we need to have it in sooner. So I have a conclusion now. I spent a lot of time there. Enrollment's going up, but not a lot. We're still going to anticipate that we're still going to have our memorandum of agreement on class size and composition. That does very good things for class size in the school district. About 78 teachers and 6 FTE for education assistants are in that fund. That drops our class sizes by about 5 or 6 students across the board. And then, we are beginning the budget process still in sound financial position, but it's not sustainable position with everything I've just mentioned. There's a lot of pressures coming, and we would use our surplus very fast, could use it all in 1 year. So we need to be thinking about how much of that surplus to apply, and we'll have a lot of work for you around that. And so that is the budget report.
Questions, Trustee Schmidt?
To the Chair, Secretary Treasurer, could you please remind me how much of surplus we used last year to balance this current year's budget?
Yeah, it ended up at 2.4 million of surplus. Mm-hmm. It grew a little bit.
Trustee Souza.
Thank you. This is great. Thank you so much, Jason. So clear once again. In terms of, and this has been out in the media a great deal, but I know it's like at the higher level. So I just want to make sure that in terms of the international student program and what's been happening across the provinces and federally in terms of caps on international students, that is just at the college and university levels and does not affect
Correct.
Oh,
I think that's a response to housing pressures.
yeah,
Which is
right,
different
which was
than revenues, yeah.
overassumed, okay. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Just a comment, I appreciate what you've done, Jason. I know we talked about this over the last few years. We knew that we were gonna get into this predicament. And I kind of remember when we first started, when we got rid of funding protection, we had a big struggle. Thank you to everybody. It just means we gotta tighten the belt a little bit and start using some stuff. Because this year we may get through, but next year it's gonna be a little bit harder.
Absolutely. Yeah, moving into the next item. I put it up here on the board. This is the work of Mike Russell. And together, I imagine we'll go over this. So Mike compiled this report. A total of 95 people completed this survey on the budget. That's actually down a fair bit. It's still feedback, and it still adds value to the process, but it may just be that we had a lot of other surveys out at the same time as well with 3-year calendar and other things. So question number 1, what best describes your connection to the school district? So we had some students, that's great. That's usually actually that's a bigger block of students than we typically see.
It typically is, yeah.
We had staff, we had parents, community members, and grandparents. You can see the numbers there. Question number 2 was around learning priorities, and although you can see that you can't see what was there, we can on the next slide. So please take a moment to choose 1 to 2 objectives you believe we should focus on. So here they are. The number 1 objective was to invest in supports to improve reading and math skills. The other 2 objectives are there too. Second one would be invest in programs like trades, applied skills, and tech. And then the final one would be to work with community, create and provide more opportunities for young families. And then Mike put many of these other topics up here. Mike, you want to describe this part?
Yeah, so this is the analysis I did of the comments that came in on this section. So we had several comments that would come in as follow-up to the answers there. Those were analyzed and they were, the trends were looked at. So these are the trends under them and a little bit of a description of a sentence there to tell you what that's about. And I've done that for every question going through.
Question number 3, again, we got to get down to the data before we see it, but the question was, please take a moment to choose 1 to 2 objectives you believe we should focus on this year under Indigenous Ways of Knowing priority. These are all tied to the strategic priorities. So here they are. Number 1 in the non-highlighted, ensure every learner feels safe at school and can learn in a way that is true to their own history and culture. And you can see the other answers actually not too far behind a couple of them. So some pretty consistent responses. And then it says here, due to an error in question format, they were only allowed to select 1 priority. So that'd be the same as the calendar survey. Question 3, this would be the actual verbal feedback.
And the one thing about the feedback that's come is that the trends are the same through a lot of these questions. So what you're seeing here are specific ones picked out for those questions, but a lot of people would come and answer the same thing for question 1, 2, 3, 4. That their feedback would be the same.
Question 4, culture care priorities. And down at the bottom, promote safe and inclusive learning environments for our diverse community. You can see the other levels of feedback there as well. Let's leave it up there for a second. You have some, next one would be mental health on the list there. And then the feedback is here. I'll move along.
That last one, actually, once School Messenger gets fired up, that last one will be completely handled, right?
Question 5, future-focused systems. And you can see a strong response on the bottom one. And then the feedback here. Small communities. Thank you, Nick.
Questions? Trustee Souza?
Thank you for this. Is it possible to get a copy of the slide deck?
Meg's got that. Here's your request.
Thank you.
Okay, one other thing here. Okay, I have one more agenda item. This was the great news we received from the Ministry of Finance. I put it on here. This is the reduction in our nominal deposit rate as effective March 1st, 2024. So this will cost about $30,000 this year, I think Claudia and I figured out. So this is the province, Ministry of Finance, saying that we're getting a pretty good rate and it's probably better than what you can find elsewhere, so we're making an adjustment and putting it down. We are currently looking at alternatives to make up that difference. This is not the only place to put school district funds. There are some other options, and we're going to be exploring those. And if we have a recommendation, we'll bring it to the board. It would, of course, has to be 100% safe, no risk, as this was, and accessible. So we just wanted you to be aware that these adjustments are now in place for this year. And that concludes my budget report.
Any questions? Seeing none, that's all we have on the agenda, so motion to adjourn. Trustee Schmidt, Trustee Souza, all in favor? Thank you very much. Trustees, you can stay around for